What's going on, YouTube family? Today we're going to be talking about dealership fraud, and not the type you're thinking of. We're actually going to be talking about fraud that dealerships do to themselves, employees stealing from the dealership. And we're going to kick it off with a story where an employee stole $1.7 million from a Las Vegas dealership. So I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this are like, oh, that's karma getting back at dealerships. They ripped a bunch of people off. They deserve it. But theft and basically fraud in the car dealership realm by employees is very, very prevalent. So let's go ahead and start off with talking about Mark. Now, Mark was a general manager at a Kia store here in Las Vegas, and he allegedly stole $1.7 million. But the funny thing was, he wasn't fired because of that. He was fired because he basically failed a drug test. And because he failed his drug test, when they started basically cleaning up the mess he had in his office, they realized that he was purchasing a lot of gift cards with company accounts, which basically totaled up to $1.7 million. Now, this just shows you how crazy it is and how easy it is for people to steal money from these accounts. Now, this is a major auto group that this happened to, and I'm sure they have bean counters and all these people that are always looking at the numbers, but this is just one of the many ways that people can take money. Now, you're going to see this a lot more often because sales is basically dried up. Car dealerships are going out of business, and people are so used to living these crazy lifestyles because remember, a year and a half ago, these guys were selling cars way over MSRP, sometimes even double, making all kinds of easy money. But now it's a struggle to get people to buy regular affordable economy cars. So you're going to see more fraud stories coming out. Now, one of the most common things you hear at dealerships when it comes to frauds or employees stealing is stealing a trade. Now, this is a terminology that's been around for a while. What it means is if you bring a car into a dealership and you want to trade it in, and dealerships will always lowball you on your trade. So let's say I know this car is worth $10,000. As a dealership, I'm going to offer you $2,000. And if the customer accepts it, what the salesman usually does is they will take $2,000 out of their pocket to cover the trade. So this way they're like, oh, the customer's giving us $2,000 down. They want to keep their trade, and we're going to work the deal this way. And then once they finish the deal, the salesman buys the car for $2,000, and then he curbs it on the side of the street, making more money. This is something that happens all the time. This is just another revenue center for dealers, so that's why they're very coveted on holding trades and not letting salespeople do it. And you will see this quite a bit. I had a dealership here in Las Vegas that we did some consulting for. Their last general manager basically lost them tons of money. He was taking their credit cards, taking it to the strip clubs, buying all kinds of crazy stuff. And that's just the things they caught. So they hired me to go through their books and see what else I found. And I saw a lot of contracts that were rewritten 3 or 4 times. So after looking into the dealer software, I saw that the down payment was changed quite a bit. So I printed out all the ones and I started calling each customer. Hey, Mr. Smith, how much did you pay down on your Ford F-150? I paid $4,000 down. Talk to the next person. How much did you pay? I paid $3,000 down. But looking at the contracts, the dollar amounts were different. They were lower. What he would do is he would raise the price of the car $2,000, $3,000. People would put maybe $4,000 or $5,000 down, and then he would pocket $2,000, lower the sales price, telling the customer they're saving him with sales tax money, and he would pocket the difference in his pocket, and the dealership didn't know any better. This guy winded up stealing over $200,000 in 18 months. So it's something, like I said, that you see all the time, and a lot of these absentee owners don't realize it, unfortunately, till it's too late. So the next fraud we're going to be talking about is firebombing finance. Now, I know none of you guys are going to know this terminology, but this is where your finance manager literally screws the dealership over. These guys always show up to independent dealerships and some franchise stores and say that they're the greatest, finance guy in the world. They're going to get all these deals bought, and they ask for crazy amounts of money. A lot of inexperienced owners basically buy their BS and hire them. And what they do is they basically put these dealers in debt. So when I sell a car, especially to a person with low credit score or a bad deal, the banks are going to ask for 2 concessions. They're either going to ask for more money down, or they're going to charge me, the dealership, more money to buy that deal, or they're going to charge me a thing called recourse. Recourse means that you are tied to this deal for maybe 1 month, 2 months. This particular dealership that we went down in Texas to figure out, they had 6-month recourse on over 120 deals. So just imagine being married to somebody with bad credit for 6 months. And that's exactly what happens. Now, if the customer doesn't make their first 6 payments, that means that the dealership that did the deal has to pay the bank back and then go chase the customer for the repos. And a lot of these guys do this stuff. They'll stay there long enough until the finance department basically explodes. They collect all the money, they collect all the bonuses and commissions that they can get. And as soon as all the buybacks start coming back, hey, the bank's like, this customer to make their payments, this customer to make their payments, they've already left and moved on to another dealership. And the owners are left with all this carnage of basically having to pay back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to the bank. It happens all the time. So if you're a small independent dealer thinking about hiring a finance manager, take your time, because these guys are going to literally burn a hole in your wallet. So the next fraud we're going to be talking about is ghost inventory. Now, typically at dealerships, there's multiple people buying and selling cars. You're supposed to do this. It's like a checks and balance. But at some franchise stores and independent stores, there's one person in charge of overseeing everything, buying, selling cars, and even going to the auction, doing all that. So what happens is these guys get all the power and nobody's checking them. And sometimes they'll go and they'll overpay for a car to get kickbacks from people, at the auction. So they'll tell one of their buddies, hey, I'll pay you $100,000 for this G-Wagon, even though it's worth like 80, just kick me back 10 grand. And they'll do it, and then they'll sell it at the dealership for a loss. They don't care, because in the scheme of things, it's just nothing to them. So that's one of the ways. But the biggest thing is when they don't buy the car. They'll buy a fake car, a ghost inventory car, where they'll tell everybody, oh, I bought a Nissan Altima for 20 grand, and they'll write a check to a person. The person will go cash a check, and they'll wind up giving that person the money. And then they have this fake car with a fake VIN number and a stock number just sitting there. And then every time they do audits, hey, where's this Nissan Altima that was supposed to be, being here out for sale? Oh, it was a piece of crap car. They couldn't give me the title. We sent it back. We're going to get our money back. And they can kick that can sometimes months down the road, because dealerships are buying 200 to 300 cars a month, especially franchise store. One car is not uncommon to have title issues or other things. So these guys do this quite a bit. They'll buy cars that don't really exist, or they'll sell cars to people, like if they owe money. Like we had one guy here in Vegas that was just a complete gambleaholic, and I guess he owned a bookie and a bunch of people money. He would literally give them free cars. So he would write the contracts and send them out. He would do the paperwork himself, but he would never log the cars into the main system. So on paper and through the DMV, the cars were sold, plated, out on the streets, already gone. But in the meantime, the titles were still there in the dealership, and in the main archive, it was basically posted up for sale, for recon, or transferred to the auction. And so a lot of times they don't find out about these scams until the general managers get fired. Now, you're going to see, like I said, a lot of general managers getting fired because the money's not there. They bought, these stupid cars for way over book. They can't sell them. And so every dealer's going to get impatient. They're going to fire all these guys. And then when they start firing these people, this is where all this fraud's going to be uncovered. And like I said, we're going to see this happen more and more often. Now, the next fraud I'm going to be talking about have to do with the actual customers. There are a lot of people out there that will make fake documentation for their customers to sell cars. I remember here in Vegas, there was a guy with a minivan that would drive around. He would give you driver's license, pay stubs, bank statements, all kinds of crazy stuff. He had a bunch of cell phones and fax machines in his car where he could do job verification. It was the funniest thing. You could pay him like $500 for a complete package, and he would do everything for you. Now, we always tell people you stay away, because once the bank finds out you do a few of those, they will cut you off. So it's not worth the headache. But a lot of the salespeople don't care. They only get commission unless they sell cars. So they would meet these people and buy the stips, the documents, to do whatever they could to sell more cars. So they'd be running ads on like Facebook, Craigslist, no job, no down payment, just, as long as you have this, this, and this. And these people would show up, hey man, I have okay credit, but I don't have any money down. No problem. I'm going to get you a pay stub. We're going to write a check. We're going to do whatever. And we're going to make the banks, fall in love with you because, we can get you bought with all these fake documents. And they would push these deals through. And unfortunately, when these deals blow up, the banks will literally look and see fraud, and they have two options. The dealership can either buy back every single deal that this shady salesperson put through, or they will basically cancel their contract, and the dealership can lose hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every single year, depending on how many deals this bank buys. And this is a real big problem, because unfortunately, you will see this quite a bit. Now, the next fraud has to do with identity theft. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know what CPNs are. They're basically fake social security numbers. Don't ever use one. Don't mess with it. It's 100% illegal. I don't care what you guys say in the comments. It's basically bad juju, so don't ever buy one. So what these guys were doing, these sales groups in Atlanta, they were making fake people. So they already had fake documents. They're like, why don't we just take it a step further and get fake people and start selling cars? And what these guys were doing was pretty hilarious, but also brilliant. They were making fake people with fake social security numbers, fake driver's license, because during the pandemic, you could buy cars online. You didn't have to be there. And then they would have the salespeople drop them off to the customers. So these guys were basically buying a bunch of cars and dropping them off to their customers, which didn't exist. They were fake people, but they were cleaning the cars up and renting them out on Turo. Now, they were making lots of money. Supposedly, they had over 100 cars that were rented out. They made a bunch of money from the sales, but the whole reason this thing fell is because Turo basically that dried up. The market was getting slow. And so instead of them making all the car payments, they decided to just pocket the money and run it out till they did that. And so they started noticing that when you have multiple loans failing, they're going to see if there's something, connected, whether it's the bank or the dealership. And they saw the same two salesmen on every single deal that basically was flagged for fraud because this person wasn't real, this person wasn't answering their phone calls, the company didn't exist. And one or two, it happens. But when you get over 100 deals that all basically go belly up in one, month, it's definitely a red flag. And I don't know how these guys don't think about this, but they basically got caught that way. The feds raided their warehouse, took all their rental cars, and I can't remember. I think the guys are still waiting like prison time or something like that. But this is, like I said, just one of the other crazy things that they do. So the next fraud we're going to be talking about is taking in trade-ins and not paying them off. Now, it happens a lot more than what you think. So if you usually take your car and you trade into a dealership, you expect the dealership to pay it off. But there are some dealerships that don't have any money. So what they do is they make payments on your car so they leave you alone, or they wind up selling it to somebody else and never paying off your loan. And then people wind up getting credit notices. Repo guys show up to their doors like, where's the car? And you're like, well, I traded it in 6 months ago for my brand new Jeep. And now they're like, oh, it's fraud. It's something bad, something illegal. They ruin your credit. So once again, you're going to see this a lot more now that dealers don't have any money. They're going to do a lot of shady stuff to keep their dealership alive. And unfortunately, this is one of the things that they'll do. If they can save $30,000, not pay off your car and sell you another car and then probably sell that car again and pocket the cash and they'll pay it eventually. That's what these guys do. It's like a shell game or robbing Peter to pay Paul. So please be careful when you do this and you trade in your car. You want to make sure you talk to the banks and you make sure that they pay it off within 30 to 45 days. That's the typical window. And if they don't, just keep calling the dealership and calling the bank just to double check and make sure, because there are legal protections. If the dealership does screw you, you do have some rights and the banks will work with you if you let them know ahead of time before they start dinging your credit. And so the next fraud I'm going to be talking about is when customers don't get their titles. And it's usually because the salesman did something wrong, or the finance manager, or the actual general manager. Now, when you usually buy a car, the dealership has maybe 30 to 60 days to send the title out to the bank or to you to get it processed through the DMV. This is just something that typically happens. But I'm sure you guys heard over the pandemic that there was a lot of people that never got their titles because the DMV was slow and it was hard to get all this other stuff. But there are a lot of people that will never, ever get their titles. And here's a few reasons why. First one is just like what we talked about in the last fraud. They don't pay off your trade. So they sell you a car, but they still owe another bank money. Now, the good news is the customer is protected. They have to file a complaint at DMV, and DMV will issue a new title to the bank or to yourself. The second one is every bank has a line of credit, which is called a flooring line. They use this line of credit to go buy cars at the auction and then sell to the general public. Now, the flooring line will not release a title unless they are paid. And more than likely, the dealership sold it, pocketed the money from the bank, and never paid off the flooring line. So now this flooring line's like, well, we want our money. The bank's like, we want our title. And usually dealerships, when it gets to that point, they either cut off the bank, cut off the flooring line, or they just go bankrupt and just disappear. But once again, if you bought it from a dealer that's licensed, you can always go to the DMV, file a complaint, and you will get your title. Now, one of the craziest ones I saw was actually here in Vegas. I saw one in Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, and I think it was Miami, Florida. These sales managers and these finance managers get kind of greedy, and they're always playing this balancing game because they're no longer making the same crazy money. So what they'll do is they'll take something like a big deal. Let's say this G-Wagon. They sold it for $80,000. The customer has good credit. They will go and they will sell this car to 5 different banks. Now, what happens is when you're a dealer, you're trusted to provide the bank a title, and you're being upheld that you're a responsible person, you're going to do all the correct stuff. So these guys sell this car to 5 different banks, and they get $100,000 from all 5 banks. Well, guess what? They got 60 to 90 days before they can, the banks start bugging them for their money back. So they're either going to go out and travel, have fun, gamble, but they'll figure out they'll give the money back. Well, these guys didn't do this. They basically knew that they were moving basically overseas and never coming back. So they did this. The guy in Vegas did it for like 30, 40 cars, and supposedly the guys in Miami did it for over 100. And so they sold 100 cars to 3 to 5 banks, pocketed all the money, and then dipped out. And so the owner basically was left with all the carnage of basically trying to figure out, how do I pay all these bank-backed millions of dollars? How do I do this? How do I do that? And this is something, once again, you are covered under law through the actual dealership. You just got to file a complaint with the DMV. But the reason why I found out this story here in Vegas was one of my friends, they made all their payments, and then all of a sudden a repo truck came to pick up the car. And when she came out to address them, they said she never made a payment. And she called the bank and she's like, well, Westlake has my deal. I made every single payment. Here it is. She's on the phone with them. We're not from Westlake. We're from Wells Fargo. And she's like, well, I don't have a bank loan to Wells Fargo. And they're like, well, this is the VIN. This is the car. We're taking it. And so she had to go to court. All the other banks wanted to get that car once it hit the auction, and she was trying to get it back, but thankfully she was able to get it back because, like I said, you are protected as a person through the DMV. So unfortunately, they all lost the money, but she got to keep the car. And on top of that, Westlake actually forgave her debt because they didn't want any of the legal headaches or anything like that. And she ended up getting the title, I think, like almost a year later. But this is something, once again, that you're going to see start popping up more because people are getting desperate. So please be careful when you buy these cars. If you haven't gotten the title, or if your bank calls you and asks you for the title, start bugging the dealership and let the DMV know. If anything, if you get a weird feeling and they're not answering your calls back or taking care of you, always file a complaint with the DMV. That's the fastest way to get the banks and the dealerships to move. Now, I saved the craziest one for last. Now, I've talked about VIN swaps and stolen cars on this channel before, but if you haven't heard of this, it's usually when you buy a car, and a lot of these guys will get like a rental car, they'll rent it under some fake name, they'll drive it out of the state, and they'll swap the VIN numbers, they'll swap everything and make it look like a completely different car, print on a new title, and then they sell it to dealerships or banks. And a lot of these dealership employees are in on it because they make extra money because they look good. So what they would do is they would set up these things, and what this guy did in Louisiana is they were running ads for basically buying cars, and they were getting every shady person in the area to get them because they were writing checks to cash, not to the people, but to cash. They would also pay cash. And so they were getting all these crazy deals because as a dealer, we need to show some sort of track record of where we bought the car, who we bought it from, copies of IDs, all that other fun stuff to make sure that if we do get, caught with the stolen car, we can show that who the person was that we bought it from. But these guys are buying cash from cars, sight unseen. They had like a tent, I guess, on the side of the road, and they were just a big sign just buying cars. And what happened is when one of these cars ended up getting serviced at the dealership plugged it in, and the VIN number came up stolen. And once the feds got there, they realized that this car was not the one that was sold, so they went back to the dealership. They had no idea. Unfortunately, it was a bad thing, which it does happen, and they had to let the car go. Now, the thing that got them in trouble was that was just the first of many cars that customers would take it in to either get it emissions or serviced, and when they would plug it into the scanners, the VIN number didn't match, and some of the years didn't match, where they would look at the car, order parts for 2021, but the car was clearly a 2018 or 19. And so after the mechanics looked at this, realized that these cars weren't what they say they were, they started diving in the cars deeper, looking at certain VIN plates that are hard to replace, and that's when they found out that a lot of these cars were stolen. So I believe that dealership in Louisiana ended up getting popped and shut down, but it's very prevalent to see this stuff. Now, if it does happen, once again, you do have rights, but you have to be quick because a dealership has a bond and it's about $100,000. So if you go in, you file a complaint, and the DMV give you all the information for the bond, you could sue the bond right away and you can get your money back. But you got to be first in line because if there's like 60, 70 people, that bond is gone. And in some states, you can actually sue the insurance company for fraud and get some of your money back. But unfortunately, it will take probably about a year in court to do it. Now, once again, you're going to see a lot of these scams and a lot of this bad stuff happening and all this fraud from dealership employees. Now, there are a lot of good dealerships and there are a lot of good employees. Don't let a few bad apples ruin the bunch. And unfortunately, everybody needs to buy cars. So just protect yourself, double check. And remember, as long as you buy from a dealership, some way, somehow, you will be able to get your money back if you file a complaint through the DMV or you sue their insurance, whatever the case is. But the stories that I told you today are just a slight glimpse into the car business. So even as dealers, we have to be careful and make sure. And I've caught several of my employees that I had to fire that were stealing trade-ins, rewriting contracts, trying to chill customer deposits, just lying about all kinds of stuff. And this is something, like I said, that every business owner is going to deal with. It's just more prevalent in the car business. But I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know in the comment section below, were you affected by any of these scams, or did you know any of these? What is your opinions on dealerships in 2025? Because I'm sure they're not great, but I'd still love to hear from you guys. We're also on the march to hit 1 million subscribers before the end of the year, so please help me with that. Please like and subscribe. Also, we have a free school that you can join up for. It's the links down below. We're just going to be talking about cars, talking about stuff like this. Love to hear from you guys. If you're in the business, if you're thinking about getting in the business, whatever else, it's 100% free. So click on that, check it out, and we'll see you next video.